On my daughter's wedding day, she looked me in the eye and said, "Immediate family only." I paid for every flower, every plate of food, every detail. Yet she banished me like a stranger. I stayed silent, but I wasn't done. That night, I canceled everything. Her perfect reception collapsed before her eyes. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The crystal stem of the champagne glass slipped from Robert Hayes's fingers, shattering against the polished marble like fragments of his heart. Shards scattered in every direction, glittering beneath the chandeliers as if the ceiling had rained down fallen stars. A hush spread across the Grand Bulge. Even conversations that moments earlier had been light and sparkling, now thinned into silence, leaving only the sharp edge of disbelief. Standing at the threshold, Robert clutched a gift box wrapped by his own hands. Inside, a delicate watch rested against velvet, chosen with care, engraved with words meant to carry his love into her new life. His boots, polished for the occasion, seemed to grind against a world that no longer wanted him. Across the room, Olivia Hayes froze. The lace of her $12,000 gown whispered as she stepped back, emerald eyes wide, her painted lips trembling with a mix of shock and indignation. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she whispered, though the question cracked like thunder against the silence. Robert swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Sweetheart, it's your wedding day," he managed, voice small against the grandeur of the space. "I came to congratulate you, to give you my blessing." From Olivia's side, Daniel Mitchell emerged like a shadow-given form. His tuxedo was sharp, his smile sharper, a mask of control and cold disdain. "Mr. Hayes," he said with the politeness of a blade, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Robert's chest tightened. A misunderstanding? His eyes sought Olivia's, searching for the little girl who once begged for another story before bed, who had clung to his shoulders at playgrounds and asked to be pushed higher on the swing. But what stared back at him now was not a daughter's love. It was calculation, embarrassment, and a trace of fear that the guests might see something unbecoming. "This is a private family celebration," Olivia replied, her voice taut, every syllable clipped to preserve dignity before the audience in diamonds and silk. "Immediate family only." The words felt like ice water numbing his veins. Immediate family only. As though 28 years of single parenthood meant nothing. As though bedtime stories, scraped knees bandaged, tuition checks written in sacrifice, were erased with a sentence. "I paid for this wedding, Olivia," Robert said quietly, though the words carried more weight than the chandeliers overhead. His tone was not accusation, only truth. "Every flower, every plate, the very dress you are wearing." Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes gleaming with a superiority born not of effort, but inheritance. "Money doesn't buy class, sir," he said, lips curling. Robert waited, praying Olivia might defend him, might soften even slightly, but her gaze faltered, skimming over the crowd rather than meeting his. "He's right," she murmured. "This isn't about money, Dad. It's about belonging. You don't understand the kind of people who are here." Oh, he understood. He had built the homes these people lived in, poured foundations for their glass towers, raised beams with his own calloused hands. He understood that a construction worker's sweat was invisible once the marble floors were polished and the chandeliers hung. He understood that his sacrifice had been good enough to fund their dreams, but his presence was not welcome to witness them. Around him, the ballroom breathed in whispers. Women in shimmering gowns leaned close behind crystal flutes. Men in tailored suits tilted their heads as though eavesdropping without shame. Even the photographer lowered his camera, pausing mid-frame as though scandal was more compelling than a bride's smile. Robert placed the gift box gently on a table between untouched champagne and white orchids imported from Ecuador. "I wouldn't want to embarrass you," he said softly. He memorized her face, the familiar green eyes inherited from her mother Laura, eyes that once looked at him with warmth, but now gleamed cold as polished jade. He memorized the smile he had worked overtime to straighten with braces. The smile now turned away from him. "You're right," he whispered. "I don't belong here." The walk to the exit stretched longer than any distance he had ever traveled. Designer heels clicked against the floor behind him. Muffled laughter trailed like cruel echoes. His boots, heavy with labor and love, struck the marble as though each step nailed a coffin shut. He did not look back. Outside, the evening air struck his lungs with the freshness of freedom. Painful, sharp, but clean. The parking lot glimmered with cars whose worth dwarfed his yearly earnings. Maseratis and Teslas lined the rows like soldiers of another class. In the farthest corner, away from the chandelier's glow, waited his old pickup, the one vehicle that bore witness to 25 years of labor, of early mornings and late nights. Robert drew his phone from his pocket. The screen lit up with missed calls from his attorney regarding a property dispute. He scrolled past them, fingers steady, heart unshaken now that the shock had calcified into resolve. His thumb hovered over another contact, one he hadn't dialed in months but suddenly needed. First National Bank Business Services. Inside that ballroom, Olivia was celebrating a life she believed could stand without him. Outside, Robert Hayes was preparing to remind her of the truth. The phone rang once before a voice answered. First National, this is Patricia speaking. How may I assist you? Robert inhaled, his voice calm, professional, carrying 25 years of patience forged in construction, dust, and sacrifice. Patricia, this is Robert Hayes, account number 779452. I need to initiate stop payments on several transactions, effective immediately. As the ballroom doors closed behind him with the finality of a vault ceiling shut, Robert's world shifted. He was no longer the uninvited father. He was a man reclaiming his worth. The cab of Robert Hayes's pickup was cloaked in silence as he stared at the glowing digits on the dashboard clock. 3:47 p.m. Enough time before the banks closed. Enough time to undo everything Olivia thought was permanent. His fingers hovered over the phone for only a moment before he pressed the call, his voice calm as if he were handling any other business transaction. First National, this is Patricia speaking. How may I assist you? Patricia, this is Robert Hayes, account number 77945112. I need to initiate stop payments on several transactions. All of them are wedding related, venue rental, catering, floral arrangements, photography, music services. Effective immediately. There was a pause, the clatter of a keyboard filtering through the line. Sir, these are significant amounts. Are you certain? Completely certain. Circumstances have changed. Authorization codes rolled from his tongue with precision. 25 years of running a construction company had sharpened his memory for every contract, every number, every detail. When Patricia confirmed, her voice was professional but tinged with disbelief. Stop payments are now in effect. Confirmation numbers are being generated. Thank you, Robert said simply, and ended the call. The next number was already waiting in his contacts. Elegant Affairs Catering. Olivia's insistence on luxury had turned their menu into a spectacle of wealth. Lobster tails, filet mignon, hors d'oeuvres flown in overnight. He dialed. Elegant Affairs, this is Marcus. Marcus, this is Robert Hayes regarding the Mitchell wedding reception. Payment authorization has been revoked. You'll want to secure your equipment and remaining food immediately. Silence stretched until Marcus finally asked, Sir, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying the bank has canceled authorization. Effective now, protect your assets. But we're in the middle of service. The main course hasn't even been served. That's unfortunate timing, Robert said, steady, professional. You may want to discuss alternative payment arrangements with the wedding party. Marcus hung up without another word. Robert could picture him now, moving quickly, gathering his staff, preparing for retreat. One by one, the calls continued. Bellingham Blooms, this is Susan. Susan, the arrangements for the Mitchell wedding will need to be collected. Authorization has been canceled. Move quickly if you want to salvage value. Her stunned silence lasted only a beat before she whispered, They're integrated into the entire venue design. Business is business, Robert replied. The photographer, the string quartet, the linen rental company. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Polite disbelief, followed by panic, followed by abrupt endings as reality began to spread through service entrances and back hallways. When the last call ended, the clock read 4:15. Through the windshield, Robert watched a white van pull up near the service doors. Marcus, no doubt arriving with his staff to salvage what he could. Robert's lips tightened. Inside, Olivia was probably still smiling for pictures. blissfully unaware that her perfect day was unraveling from the seams. By 4:20, the first florist truck appeared. Susan herself carried empty containers through the side doors. Robert leaned back against the seat, watching the procession with a calm intensity, as though witnessing the demolition of a structure long overdue for collapse. Inside the ballroom, guests clinked glasses, raised toasts beneath golden chandeliers. Olivia stood radiant in her gown, Daniel shaking hands and trading business talk with his father's colleagues. Neither of them noticed the florist team slip quietly into the room. But the silence that fell over the crowd when Susan began dismantling the altar arrangement could not be ignored. Guests turned, confusion painting their faces as orchids disappeared into plastic bins. Olivia approached, her composure strained. "We're in the middle of our reception. Whatever you need can wait until later," she said, a brittle smile fixed in place. Susan held a bundle of orchids in her arms, her expression flat. "Payment authorization for these arrangements was canceled 40 minutes ago. We're here to recover our property." The word struck Olivia like a slap. "That's impossible. Everything was paid weeks ago. The account holder contacted us directly. All payments have been revoked." Susan gestured to her assistants, who began stripping centerpieces from the tables. Confusion rippled outward in waves. Daniel strode across the ballroom, his voice cutting like a whip. "What's happening here?" "Payment issues," Susan answered. "We're collecting unpaid merchandise." "This is unacceptable," Daniel snapped. "Get your manager on the phone immediately." "I am the manager," Susan said coolly, "and the contract is clear. Canceled payments void our service obligations." Even as she spoke, Marcus and his catering staff appeared through the main doors. Their grim faces carried no apology, only purpose. White cloths draped over serving stations as guests murmured in alarm. The string quartet stopped mid-performance when their coordinator whispered in their ears. Music dissolved into silence. Lights dimmed as sound equipment was quietly unplugged. Olivia stood motionless in the center of her collapsing celebration. Her gown shimmered, untouched, as the world she'd constructed with her father's money fell apart piece by piece. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "Not today." Daniel's voice carried new suspicion as he turned on her. "Olivia, what kind of arrangement did your family make? How could this happen?" Her voice cracked. "I don't know. Everything was supposed to be handled." The venue coordinator approached, pale, phone pressed to her ear. Her words were hushed but merciless. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've just spoken with our accounting department. All payments originated from a single account under Robert Hayes. That account holder has revoked authorization for every transaction." The truth landed like stone in Olivia's chest. Around her, guests stared openly, no longer hiding their shock. Champagne glasses remained untouched in trembling hands. Daniel's fury sharpened with every second. Outside, Robert's phone buzzed against the dashboard. Olivia's name glowed across the screen. Desperate, insistent. He did not answer. Not yet. Inside, the first lessons were being taught, and Robert Hayes had no intention of interrupting. The silence of the truck wrapped around Robert Hayes like armor, but memory pierced through it, sharp and merciless. He could see Olivia's face in the ballroom, perfect makeup, eyes turning away from him as though he were nothing but an intrusion. The sound of his boots against marble had echoed louder than any applause. Yet beneath the sting of rejection lay years of sacrifice, a story carved not in stone but in flesh, in late nights, in choices that had cost him everything. The images came unbidden, dragging him backward through decades. Olivia was 3 when Laura died. Cancer had taken his wife in 6 bitter months, leaving Robert with a toddler who asked every night, "Where's Mommy?" He had sat on the edge of her tiny bed, the wallpaper bright with painted stars, telling stories until her eyes finally closed. He could have remarried quickly, found someone to help shoulder the weight, but he hadn't. He chose to be both parents, to give Olivia a childhood untouched by loss even as his own heart carried it every day. At 5, she had curled against his chest in pink pajamas, voice sleepy but insistent. "Daddy, one more story." He'd already read 3, already faced an early meeting the next morning. Yet how could he say no? Those green eyes, Laura's eyes, stared at him with boundless trust. "Of course, sweetheart. Daddy always has time for you." That line became a promise, one he repeated so often it seemed etched into his bones. Time passed, sacrifice grew. Riverside Academy came first, tuition bills that sliced away profits he could have invested in the company. The best education money can buy, he told himself, writing checks worth months of sweat and sleepless nights. Olivia had hugged him then, radiant with joy. "Thank you, Daddy. I'll study really hard. I'll make you proud." She did. Straight A's, school plays where he clapped louder than any parent, spelling bees where she rushed into his arms afterward, glowing with accomplishment. But high school shifted everything. Surrounded by classmates with trust funds and vacation homes, Olivia began to measure love in possessions. Her 16th birthday became a performance. Balloons, catering, a car in the driveway. Robert had bought her a Honda Civic, reliable and safe. Yet he still remembered her lips tightening, her words sharp with disappointment. "Everyone else got BMWs, Dad. This is kind of embarrassing." That was the first time gratitude slipped from her voice, replaced by expectation. He had seen the warning but looked away, convincing himself it was teenage arrogance. College nearly broke him. Northwestern University, her dream, her demand. Tuition alone devoured $52,000 a year, room and board another 15. Sorority dues, spring breaks in Cancun, study abroad in Italy, expenses dressed as, essential opportunities. Phone calls came less often, each reduced to numbers and deadlines. "Dad, I need $3,000 for the fraternity trip. It's essential for networking." He sent it. Always he sent it. By the time Olivia met Daniel Mitchell, she was living in a world Robert's money built, but his presence diminished. Daniel's family carried old money, old influence. Robert became the small business owner in introductions, as though decades of building Hayes construction, 60 employees, dozens of projects, meant nothing. Olivia had once bragged about him, proud of his rough hands and honest work. Now she asked him quietly, "Could you maybe not wear work boots when you visit? Daniel's friends will be there." The memory struck like a hammer. He had paid for braces that straightened her smile, for clothes that let her blend into elite crowds, for every detail that lifted her into their circle. And yet, in that ballroom, she had declared him unworthy of belonging. Robert leaned back in the driver's seat, breath steadying. The pattern was clear now. Nearly $1 million over 25 years. Education, housing, transportation, luxuries disguised as needs. He had given her everything. She had given back entitlement. His phone buzzed again. Olivia's name glowed on the screen, insistent, desperate. Through the windshield, he could see her silhouette in the doorway of the venue, dress trailing like a flag of surrender. She pressed the phone to her ear, scanning the parking lot as though he might still appear. The sight should have broken him. Instead, it hardened him. She was calling for rescue. But this time there would be no easy rescue. Robert inhaled deeply, the cold March air filling his lungs. For 28 years, love had meant sacrifice. Tonight, love would mean truth. Painful, merciless truth. The lessons she had escaped all her life were finally coming. And as he watched the first vendors dismantle the celebration he had funded, Robert understood something with clarity that chilled him. This was not revenge. This was justice. If you've been following Robert's story, you know the lesson is only beginning. Stay with this journey, like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss how one father's love transforms into the hardest education his daughter has ever faced. The glow of the dashboard clock marked 4:32 p.m. when Robert Hayes' phone lit up again. Olivia's name filled the screen, her desperation growing with every unanswered ring. For a moment, he let it vibrate against the console, the sound oddly rhythmic, a metronome marking the unraveling of her perfect day. Finally, he pressed the green icon, lifting it to his ear. Olivia's voice burst through, sharp with panic. "What have you done? Everything's falling apart. The flowers are being taken out. The food service, guests are staring. Michael's family is furious. You have to fix this. Please, you have to call them back." Robert listened, steady and silent, until her words broke against his calm. "Where are you calling from?" "I stepped into the hallway," she rushed. "The coordinator said the bills aren't paid. That's impossible, right? You handled everything." I did, Robert said evenly, and then I stopped. Her breath caught on the other end. You can't just stop. This is my wedding day. You told me I didn't belong there, he replied. Do you remember? Immediate family only. That's not what I meant, she pleaded. I was stressed, nervous. I didn't want people to judge us. Dad, you know how these people are. Michael's friends, his family. I didn't mean it like it sounded. Robert closed his eyes, gripping the steering wheel. When was the last time you thanked me for anything? The line went silent, except for her quick breathing. In the background, muffled voices rose, Michael's anger slicing through the air. Olivia's tone shifted, softer now, fragile. I've always been grateful, you know that. No, Robert said firmly. I don't know that. What I know is that you dismissed me from a wedding I paid for entirely. And I want you to hear this clearly, Olivia. I've spent nearly $1 million on you over the last 25 years. Education, housing, cars, trips, and today, almost $1 million. And the silence on the other end grew heavier, broken only by a faint sob. That can't be right. It's conservative, he said. I've kept records, every payment, every receipt. I chose your future over my comfort, your happiness over my rest. And today you told me I wasn't worthy to stand beside you. Dad, please, Olivia whispered. I'll make this up to you, I promise. Just authorize the payments again. We can save the reception. People are still here. The photographer is waiting. The cake hasn't even been cut. Please don't do this to me. Robert's voice was steady as stone. What exactly do you plan to use for payment? She hesitated. I thought you would handle it. You always do. I always have, he admitted. That ends now. Her composure cracked, panic spilling through. I don't have that kind of money. You know I don't. Michael doesn't either. His family is asking questions I can't answer. Please, Dad, they're saying things. I need you. You need to learn, Robert said quietly. For 25 years, I've carried you. Tonight, you're going to stand on your own. Her voice broke. So what do you want from me? I want you to understand what you threw away when you dismissed me today. Respect, gratitude, a father who would have given his life for you. You turned him into a stranger at your own wedding. I understand now, she said quickly, desperation bleeding through her words. I was wrong. Can we fix this? We'll see, Robert replied. I'm reviewing our entire financial relationship. There will be documentation, and when I'm ready, we'll talk again. Dad, he ended the call before she could finish. The silence afterward was immediate, thick, but not heavy. For the first time in years, he felt a clarity that cut clean. He set the phone down and stared through the windshield, watching another service van pull up to the venue. Staff filed in briskly, faces tight with urgency, their footsteps echoing toward the ballroom, where Olivia's life was unraveling. Robert turned the key in the ignition. The truck rumbled to life, its familiar growl steadying him. He drove slowly out of the lot, past the towering windows where crystal chandeliers still blazed, their light reflecting chaos within. Guests stood in clusters, unease spilling across their expensive clothes. Olivia's gown glimmered faintly in the distance, a beacon of desperation. By the time Robert reached his driveway, dusk had settled over Spokane. The garage door shut behind him with the finality of a curtain falling at the end of an act. He sat in the quiet, listening as voicemail notifications filled the phone one after another. Voicemail 1. Dad, there's been some mistake. Call me back. Voicemail 2. This isn't funny anymore. The vendors are taking everything. Voicemail 3. Michael's family is demanding answers. Please, I need you. Mom. Voicemail 4. Her voice cracking, trembling with tears. I need you, Dad. Please pick up. Robert listened to each message in silence, then set the phone aside. His eyes shifted to the corner of his study where filing cabinets stood like sentinels. Decades of record keeping. Every receipt, every invoice, every sacrifice reduced to paper. Tonight, those papers would serve a new purpose. He rose, flicked on the desk lamp, and opened the first drawer. A folder labeled Olivia Education sat waiting, thick with years of documentation. Tuition checks, dorm contracts, receipts from study abroad. Each page a reminder of what he had given and what she had taken. This wasn't revenge. This was accounting. Robert poured himself a cup of coffee and opened a new spreadsheet on his computer. Columns glowed against the dark screen. Date, description, amount, category, running total. His fingers moved with methodical precision, entering numbers that painted a history Olivia had never cared to know. He sipped the coffee slowly, gaze steady. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. Inside, Robert Hayes was preparing not only balance sheets, but the lesson of a lifetime. The air in Robert Hayes' study felt charged, heavy with the quiet electricity of decision. Documents lay spread across his desk like evidence in a trial. The trial of a daughter's entitlement and a father's endless sacrifice. Numbers told the story better than memory ever could. Tuition, $284,000. Transportation, $75,000. Housing, $125,000. Personal expenses, $180,000. The wedding itself, $147,000. Nearly $1 million across 25 years, every dollar accounted for. The phone rang again. Olivia's name, her 16th attempt since he'd left the ballroom. Robert let it buzz, his jaw set, his hands moving instead to the phone number of Margaret Cole, Spokane's most formidable attorney. If Olivia would not hear him as a father, she would hear him through the language of law. Margaret Cole, a crisp voice answered. Margaret, this is Robert Hayes. I need an emergency consultation. I'll bring documentation within the hour. Understood, she replied. No hesitation. By morning, the mahogany-paneled offices of Cole and Associates became the setting for the next stage of Olivia's education. Robert arrived with his briefcase, heavy not only with paper, but with the weight of years. Margaret greeted him with firm precision, her silver hair and sharp eyes radiating authority. I reviewed your preliminary documentation last night, she said as they sat across from one another. She spread the folders across the polished table, scanning them with quick efficiency. This record-keeping is exceptional. Every expense logged, every payment documented. The total amount involved, $937,000, is substantial even by our standards. Robert leaned back, voice calm, almost detached. I want this handled professionally. No emotions, just business. My daughter needs to understand what she's taken for granted. Margaret tapped her pen thoughtfully. We can proceed with a formal demand letter. Reclassification of gifts as recoverable loans. 30 days to repay, full documentation attached. Failure to respond triggers legal proceedings. This approach keeps it clean. Business, not family drama. Robert nodded. That's what I want. She dismissed me as her father. She will respect me as a creditor. By noon, the documents were prepared. Official letterhead, stamped and sealed. The demand was clear. Repayment of $937,000 within 30 days or face civil litigation. Margaret's courier would deliver it personally to the Spokane Grand Hotel, where Olivia and Daniel were staying after the disastrous reception. At 2:15 p.m., Robert's phone buzzed with confirmation. Delivery complete. Signature, Olivia Mitchell. He pictured the moment vividly. The hotel staff knocking at their suite, handing over an envelope marked with Cole and Associates. Olivia's confusion as she tore it open, expecting perhaps vendor paperwork. Daniel taking charge, arrogance steady until comprehension dawned. Then the fury, the panic, the truth written in black and white, undeniable and cold. By 2:47 p.m., Olivia's number flashed across Robert's phone again. He didn't answer. He let each call roll to voicemail. Message 1, Dad, what is this? This can't be real. Message 2, 900,000? That's impossible. You never said these were loans. Message 3, please call back. Michael's family is demanding answers. Message 4, her voice breaking into sobs. I don't understand how everything went so wrong so fast. Robert listened, unmoved. Inside the hotel, Olivia was unraveling. While outside, accountability had finally found her. For 28 years, she had floated on the surface of privilege. Now the water was deep, and she would either learn to swim or sink. That evening, Robert sat at his desk, organizing copies of every document. Bank statements, invoices, receipts, spreadsheets. Each page was a stone in the foundation of truth he had built, one Olivia could no longer ignore. He thought back to Laura, her laughter, her strength, her final days. He had promised her their daughter would never want for anything. He had kept that promise, but in doing so he had created a woman who believed sacrifice was infinite, who mistook unconditional love for an endless credit line. Now the education shifted. It was no longer about giving Olivia everything. It was about teaching her the value of what she'd squandered. Robert leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pressing against his shoulders, but resolve holding him upright. Tomorrow, the story would spread. Olivia and Daniel would attempt to twist it, to spin sympathy in their favor. But Robert had the truth, bound in paper, backed by law. The stage was set. If you've been following Robert's journey, you know this is no longer just a family story. It's a battle between entitlement and accountability. Stay tuned, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe so you don't miss the next turn. What happens when love turns into legal proof? You'll want to hear what comes next. Monday morning arrived with the brittle stillness of a storm about to break. Robert Hayes was in his office at the construction site reviewing blueprints when his assistant Rachel appeared in the doorway holding a printed email, her expression uneasy. "Mr. Hayes," she began carefully, "we just received this inquiry from the Spokane Business Journal. They're asking if family troubles are affecting your business operations." Robert took the paper, scanning the professional but pointed language. Family troubles. A polite mask over sharp suspicion. His jaw tightened. "Where did they hear about this?" Rachel hesitated, then held up her tablet. "There's also this." Across the glowing screen stretched a Facebook post that had already been shared hundreds of times. Olivia's wedding portrait shone at the top, flawless in its frozen beauty. Beneath it, paragraphs of text painted Robert as a heartless father who had ruined his daughter's wedding and was now demanding an impossible fortune out of spite. Words like cruelty and revenge leapt from the post, bleeding sympathy for Olivia and Daniel. The comment section overflowed with outrage. Strangers aligning against him, some tagging local business owners Robert had known for decades. The phone on his desk began to ring. He answered, hearing the steady voice of Bob Martinez, a contractor and friend of 20 years. "James, I'm seeing some things online. People are saying you've lost control, that you're going after your daughter's wedding money. Tell me it isn't true." "There's documentation," Robert replied evenly, "that tells a very different story." "I hope so," Bob said grimly, "because some folks are asking about your city contracts. You know how quickly politics turn around here." The calls kept coming. 3 more business partners by noon, each careful, each concerned. Questions about his state of mind. Questions about his stability. Olivia and Daniel had chosen their battlefield carefully. In a city like Spokane, reputation was currency, and they were trying to bankrupt him. But they had underestimated one thing: Robert's record-keeping, his truth written in ink and figures, immovable against rumor. That evening, Robert sat at his kitchen table, files stacked neatly before him. He called Margaret Cole. "I need to schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. We're going public with the documentation." There was a pause, then her steady voice. "Are you certain? Once this is public, there's no taking it back." "They've already gone public," Robert said. "Now it's my turn." For 6 hours, he worked with relentless focus. He called old business partners, community leaders, contractors who had built their careers alongside him. One by one, he told them the truth, that Olivia and Daniel had spread lies, and that tomorrow the evidence would speak louder than gossip. He prepared the files with the precision of a man who had built houses, each page like a brick, stacked into something unshakable. Bank statements, receipts, tuition invoices, car titles, apartment leases, 25 years of sacrifice laid bare. Not opinion, not anger, only fact. By dawn, the city buzzed with rumors. By 9 o'clock, Robert stood in front of cameras and microphones, Margaret Cole beside him. The Spokane Business Journal, local television stations, even regional outlets had gathered. Robert cleared his throat, the weight of years pressing against his chest but not bending him. "For 25 years, he began, I provided for my daughter, Olivia Hayes, now Mitchell. I did so willingly and with love, but this weekend, after she dismissed me from the wedding I funded, she and her husband began spreading lies about me. Today, I present the truth." He held up the first binder, pages thick with proof. Spreadsheets categorized every expense: education, housing, transportation, personal luxuries, wedding costs. A total of $937,000 documented to the cent. Photographs accompanied the figures. Olivia at 5 in her pink pajamas, at 12 with a spelling bee ribbon, at 16 beside the Civic she had called embarrassing, at 25 with the BMW she demanded to replace it. Each image aligned with receipts that showed the true price of her life. Every dollar was accounted for, Robert continued. Not one of these expenses was repaid. Not once did she bow and ask about the ball or express consistent gratitude. And yet, I was dismissed from the very day meant to unite family. The room was silent but for the clicking of cameras. By noon, the tide had turned. Articles flooded local feeds. Father provides $937,000 over 25 years. Daughter cries cruelty. Social media shifted like sand in a storm. Screenshots of Robert's documentation spread faster than Olivia's words ever had. People marveled at the quality of his sacrifice. Comments poured in, condemning Olivia and Daniel, praising Robert's endurance. Bob Martinez called again, his voice steady this time. James, I owe you an apology. I saw the records. I understand now. That level of entitlement would break any parent. We're behind you. Others followed. The Rotary Club issued a public statement of support. Contractors posted about Robert's integrity, stories of him working long nights beside them on foundations and steel frames. Even the mayor's office made a comment about the importance of accountability within families. Olivia's Facebook post shriveled under the avalanche of truth. Once a symbol of her victimhood, it now looked hollow, naive. People who had pitied her were turning, their sympathy dissolving under the hard glare of evidence. That night, Robert sat alone in his living room, the quiet ringing with vindication. He had not only defended his name, he had shown Olivia that lies could not erase decades of sacrifice. And yet, beneath the satisfaction, there was no joy. He did not want to destroy his daughter. He wanted her to learn. The war of reputation had been fought. The truth had won, but the education was far from over. 6 days. That was all it took for Olivia Mitchell's marriage to crumble into dust. 6 days after the wedding that was supposed to crown her life with perfection, she sat in a hotel room thick with silence, while Daniel zipped his suitcase shut with sharp, angry movements. The phone call that morning had shattered whatever illusion still remained. Daniel's father had called with clipped authority, his words like a blade across the fragile thread of their new marriage. Country club friends were whispering about fraud. Business partners were asking questions about integrity. Family reputation was bleeding in front of Spokane's watchful eyes. Olivia had watched Daniel's face pale as he listened. Now she watched him shove shirts and ties into his case, the sound of drawers slamming like gunshots in the small room. Michael, wait! Her voice cracked as she reached for his arm. He shook her off with an expression she had never seen before. Not frustration, not annoyance, but something colder. Disgust. Don't, Olivia. Don't say anything right now. She stood frozen, the silk of her gown still hanging in the closet, mocking her with the memory of vows already unraveling. We just got married, she whispered. We're supposed to work through this together. Daniel's laugh was humorless. Together? What exactly have you contributed to this marriage besides expenses and expectations? Tears stung her eyes. That's not fair. It's the truth, he snapped. My father says we're tied to financial deception now. He says your father published records showing nearly $1 million in support you never acknowledged. To his world, that looks like manipulation, like fraud. And now it's on my name too. I didn't know he'd do that, Olivia protested, voice rising. He blindsided me. No, Olivia. Daniel's eyes burned. You blindsided me. You brought me into a life funded entirely by your father without telling me. You let me stand at that wedding while every single thing around us, flowers, food, music, belonged to a man you dismissed at the door. Her chest tightened, breath coming shallow. I can fix this. I'll talk to him. He zipped the suitcase with finality, the sound like a coffin closing. You don't get it. My family has built its reputation for generations. We sit on boards, we run businesses, we donate to charities. We contribute. And what do you bring? a record of taking without ever giving back. I was being a daughter, she pleaded. Daughters are supposed to be supported by their fathers. Daniel's jaw clenched. Not to the tune of nearly $1 million. Not without gratitude. Not while treating him like a bank account instead of a parent. She staggered back as though struck. For the first time, she heard the words for what they were. Truth unvarnished, brutal and undeniable. He closed the suitcase and stood at the door, his hand on the handle. My mother texted. She says I need to come home. Family obligations. You understand. The politeness made it sting worse than anger. Olivia's knees weakening. You're leaving me? After 6 days? Daniel's voice softened slightly, though his eyes remained hard. I've been alone in this marriage since it started. Maybe losing everything will teach you something your father's money never could. The door shut behind him with devastating finality. The silence that followed was unbearable. Olivia's gaze fell on the wedding dress still hanging untouched. The gown that had been meant to symbolize joy now standing as a monument to ruin. 6 days, that was all. She was left with no husband, no allies, no money, no friends willing to answer her calls. Her phone lay on the bed, screen cracked from the frantic drops of the past few days. She scrolled through her contacts, but the names felt like ghosts. Friends who once basked in her generosity now avoided her entirely. Sorority sisters stopped replying. Even her own relatives sent cold messages about responsibility and growing up. Her hand trembled as she landed on the only number she had avoided calling since the wedding night. Robert Hayes, her father. The man she had banished, humiliated, betrayed. The man who had leveled her world with nothing but truth. Tears blurred the screen as she pressed the call button. It rang once, for his voice filled her ear. Calm, steady, familiar. Hello, Olivia. Her throat constricted, the word breaking from her lips like a sob. Dad! She sank to the carpet, dress pooling around her, body shaking with the weight of everything lost. I don't know where to start. The silence stretched for a moment, and in that silence she felt the edge of mercy, sharp as glass. This was no longer about wedding receptions or canceled payments. This was about survival, about finally seeing herself stripped of everything she had hidden behind. And as her father waited, patient and unyielding, Olivia realized this was her last chance to prove she could change or be lost completely. If you've walked with Robert and Olivia this far, you know the hardest truths are still to come. Stay with the story. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss how this shattered daughter begins to face the case of becoming someone new. The phone trembled in Olivia's hand as she pressed it tighter against her ear, the sound of her father's voice almost unbearable in its calmness. Robert Hayes waited, patient as ever, giving her space to speak. But words tangled in her throat, torn between desperation and shame. Dad, she whispered again. But nothing else followed. Robert leaned back in his chair, the lamp in his study throwing a warm circle of light across papers still scattered on the desk. I'm listening, he said simply. Tears blurred her vision. I've lost everything. Daniel's gone. His family doesn't want me near them. My friends, they won't answer. I don't know where to go. Robert's silence stretched like a mirror, forcing her to hear the hollowness of her own confession. Finally, he asked, What did you learn? The question struck deeper than accusation. Olivia swallowed hard, her voice unsteady. That I didn't deserve any of it. That I treated you like a stranger when all you ever did was give. And I didn't even see it until it was too late. For a long moment, Robert said nothing. His mind drifted through decades, her laughter as a child, her demands as a teenager, her dismissals as an adult. He had always hoped she would see, but he had never forced her to, until now. I can't change the past, Olivia continued, her sobs breaking the words. But please, don't leave me like this. I need you. Robert's hand brushed across the folder nearest to him, pages filled with tuition bills, car payments, rent checks. Needing me and respecting me are two different things, he said quietly. Do you know the difference now? Her answer came without hesitation, raw and trembling. Yes, I know I can't just take. I know I can't treat you like you'll always fix everything. I know I hurt you in ways I can't undo. Robert closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. For the first time since that night at the ballroom, he felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness yet, not fully, but the beginning of a crack in the wall he had built. "Go home," he said finally. "Not to Daniel, not to your friends, home. We'll talk when you are ready to listen, not to beg." The line went silent. Olivia clutched the phone tighter, afraid to lose even the sound of his breathing. "Will you be there?" "I've always been there," Robert said, his voice steady, unshaken. "The question is, will you this time?" When the call ended, Olivia curled onto the floor of the hotel room, her gown wrinkled and damp with tears. For the first time in her life, she had nothing left to stand on. No money, no allies, no illusion of perfection. Only her father's voice remained, both stern and merciful, offering her a path she had never chosen before: humility. The following days unfolded in silence. Robert made no move to call her again, no gesture to bridge the gap. He returned to work, to blueprints and steel, to the familiar rhythm of labor that had always kept him grounded. His employees noticed a sharper edge to his focus, but they also noticed the steadiness that anchored every decision. In the evenings, Robert reviewed his files again, not to prepare for court this time, but to remind himself of the truth. Sacrifice had built this life. Sacrifice had raised a daughter who now stood at the crossroads of ruin and redemption. Whether she chose one or the other would no longer be his responsibility alone. Olivia, meanwhile, lingered in the hotel room until the bills forced her out. With no husband to lean on and no father extending an easy hand, she found herself signing forms for temporary housing, her pride shrinking with each signature. The room smelled faintly of bleach and despair, a stark contrast to the opulence she had demanded all her life. Nights stretched long. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment she had pushed Robert aside. The memory of his face at the pushroom haunted her, the quiet dignity, the sadness behind his eyes. He had stood ready to give her everything, and she had answered by slamming the door. Each morning she reached for her phone, tempted to call again, but something stopped her. For the first time, Olivia felt the weight of silence not as punishment, but as discipline. Her father had given her space to collapse. Now she had to find the strength to rise. One evening, she passed a cafe window and froze. Inside, Robert sat across from Margaret Cole, their conversation calm, professional. He looked older than she remembered, lines deeper around his eyes. But there was a quiet strength about him she had never really seen. Not the man who bent under every demand, but the man who had carried the world alone for decades. Her hand trembled against the glass. For a fleeting second, she wanted to rush inside, to beg again. But she didn't. She turned away, clutching her coat against the chill, determined this time not to demand, but to prepare. The silence continued, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with the possibility of change. And for Robert Hayes, that silence was the proof he needed, that perhaps, just perhaps, his daughter was beginning at last to understand the cost of love.